Tricia, come on in. So we had a word from our sponsor, evidently, somewhere along the way, and all that we just did. So Tricia has something for us.
Okay, I have two visions I wanted to share. I was sitting on a bench with the Lord, and we're sitting in front of a real peaceful pond. And the Lord had a pebble in his hand, and he said to me, what would happen if I threw this pebble in the pond? And then this is what he said. He began to explain to me what he's about to do in the United States of America. He said the pebble will have a ripple effect, which will grow and grow until it becomes waves. And then a mighty tsunami is going to break over the United States with revival, renewal, power, healing, miracles, and intimacy with him. He said to warn you there will be clashes with the darkness. But we don't focus on the darkness, do we? We keep our eyes on the Lord. Our focus is on the Lord, not what the enemy's doing. And his spirit and power are going to be poured out. He said the time of rest is changing, and it's a time to go on the offense with power in his presence. And then he said to me, this is another day recently, I am bringing revival to the United States. My spirit will shine from sea to shining sea, California to New York. The entire United States will shine with my spirit in revival. But there is one thing that he said to tell all of us. Because there's a huge tsunami of the Spirit coming, he wants us to clothe ourselves and position ourselves with humility and with intimacy. Because if you don't, this is a warning, you will be knocked down. If you do, you will be raised into the huge tsunami. You'll get up on the crest, and you're going to ride the wave of glorifying Jesus over this nation.
I want to do that. I want to do that. So Andrew, why don't you come here for a minute? And this is Andrew Phelan. We've been very busy this weekend. We had an event here Friday night that Andrew was overseeing, and why don't you have your friend come up too? And Krista, you too, if you like. Bring the whole fam. So you might see these flags flying around. They're beautiful, and evidently the flag maker is right there with the Lord's help, right? So she came and we did a little. Tell us what you did Friday night.
We just did a flag workshop, kind of brought a basic understanding of what a flag ministry looks like. A lot of people don't understand it. Karen's a good friend of mine. She's very influential in my life in the banner ministry. So she's here from Florida. She came in 2 days, one day here and then a day at my house. Just kind of gave everybody an understanding of what it looks like and how to stand in that ministry and represent God the best way.
Awesome. Thank you, Karen. Would you like to say anything to us?
Yeah, I just want to encourage you with the word that you were just given during worship. The Lord sent me out in the parking lot and to decree Revelation 22 verses 1 through 4 out of this house into this community and the county.
What's that say?
It says that, it's talking about the river of God that flows from the throne of God that brings the healing to the nations. And I believe that this place is a spiritual well in your county. And you're ready to see that tsunami happen out of this house.
Interesting, to the nations. I like that part. I like that part a lot. Well, thank you so much. And I just want to also say that Andrew here and Krista, they oversee along with a whole bunch of their crew here. So it's like a joint effort. But every Saturday night, you might not know, but you might want to join them. Every Saturday night we have our service here, but if you want to take a walk on the wild side, go to Newport Beach. What time?
6:30 to 10:30.
Where is it?
Newport Beach Pier.
Newport Beach. I can't say. Newport Beach Pier. It's hard to say. Why is that hard to say? Anyway, you got it. But anyway, so they do is they just sing and worship, and then they wave flags and all kinds of stuff. But they, more importantly, well, not more importantly, but they witness and share with people, and they have all kinds of divine appointments and pray for the sick and get people saved and everything. It's an outreach. And how long have you been doing this now?
Since September.
So they've been doing it every Saturday night since September. So this is like no fly-by-night thing. They've been doing this. And even if it was a fly-by-night thing, it's pretty cool, anyway, to be out there witnessing, sharing, and having a great time, you know, out in the open there. And Great thing about the beach is like one of these like anything goes zones. You notice that? I did a wedding there just recently. I've been telling everybody, and it was the craziest thing, you know. Just walked out to the beach and had a wedding. Everybody's kind of taking pictures and having fun, and that's it, you know. And then, I mean, everybody's dressed. And, okay, so we're having a wedding, big deal, you know. And everything goes there. So the amazing thing about those sort of zones is that you also can just pull out all the spiritual gifts and all the artillery and just let it rip, because people are hungry, aren't they?
Can I give a quick testimony? So last night, a couple of us were walking on the pier, and we saw all these little lights being lit on the sand. I'm like, what the heck is that? It's windy as heck. I'm like, that can't be a real flame. So we walked down there, and two friends were laying out. It was 200 candles, and they made a whole walkway lit. And someone was proposing to his girlfriend. And they saw us playing worship. They asked the whole worship team to come down and play as the whole thing happened. And we all got to witness this beautiful thing that God created and sing praise. It was so amazing last night.
I told you, anything goes. It's awesome. So, also, while I'm at this, I thought I saw Peggy come up here for a minute. You too. Thank you guys. Appreciate it. So I've been noticing some really amazing things. As a matter of fact, I had an incredible dream last night. I'll share it maybe another time if I just figure out exactly what it means. It had to do with the warehouse. But I noticed that a number of you that have been getting saved and healed and touched in the warehouse are beginning to find their way into our church, into various meetings, in my Life in the Spirit class, on Monday nights, in various places. And so I asked her, I said, what's up? We've been doing this a while, but I haven't seen so much flow before. New believers coming and people that don't know the Lord coming. And she had this amazing dream. Why don't you tell about the bricks for a minute?
So I had a dream that there was a wall, like a brick wall in between the warehouse and our church. And in my dream, I'm like, what is that? And then all of a sudden, the bricks just started coming down. I'm like, Lord, what is this? And I saw the people coming into the church. So I asked the Lord about it, and I really feel like the Lord was speaking to me about this. He's opening. There's been a wall between us as a congregation and all of us in the warehouse. And so I think God is breaking down a wall, and we're all becoming one. And the reason why He showed me, the reason why a lot of people are coming in now is because you guys are going in there and talking to them, and we're becoming family, and then they come in, they're not afraid to come in anymore. So I think it's an amazing thing, and that happened a month ago, and we've seen so many people that, they're either coming in, getting led to the Lord in there, or they're coming in to shop, and all of a sudden they're here in Mike's class.
Yeah, they're showing up in the Life of the Spirit class. The most amazing thing about this is, for me, is I've just been experimenting. I've known this for a while, but like the other day, I just went out and stood in front of those baskets. If you're newer to us, the warehouse is where we feed a lot of people. We give away $800,000, $900,000 worth of food every year, and we do it several times a week. And then there's a little class or thing that we have before people come and get food. They get some ministry. So we've seen over 2,000 people publicly pray to receive Christ in the last 4 or 5 years, and we've also seen about 2,000 people healed as well of all kinds of things, including 30 cases of cancer that we know, maybe more. So it's really quite remarkable what's supernaturally been happening over there for a long time. We just figured it's just another branch, you know. But I've just been noticing things. So I went over there the other day, and this happens to me frequently. But whenever I do it, but I just thought I'd just stand around. So I'm standing in front of the baskets where people give the food, and I start having these conversations. And I did an hour and a half of ministry there, just standing in front of those things, you know, talking to people, praying for them, you know, people telling them what's going on in the warehouse. They go, oh, really? I didn't even know. Oh, that is so cool. I want to come, you know, could I come? And, you know, and I'm going, wow, this is crazy. I'm just standing here. I didn't mean to do anything. I'm just like being nice to everybody, you know. So that's all you need to do. You know, you might want to just try it for a while. Just go in the warehouse and be nice. Just do that. And see what happens. I don't know. It's pretty cool, you know. You're going to have all these conversations, because I think what the Lord's doing is turn it into like an anything goes zone too. I mean, it's like free. You don't have all the, you know, it's just sort of a nice community. There's lots of volunteers, lots of people helping, and there's a little bit of joy in there too. There's just a sort of joy that sort of carries the thing along. So it's really nice. And when she told me that dream, I just about fell out of my chair, because I've been noticing for about the last month changes, both people in the warehouse and then people coming from the warehouse that are just newly saved, newly healed, all kinds of different kinds of people. So it's just awesome what's going on. So part of this whole tsunami she was talking about, this whole move of God across the United States, I think we're experiencing lots of change even now, as we can just feel the winds, and just winds we've been looking for a long time, especially in the area of evangelism. It's just so wonderful and exciting. So I think we're at the crossroads. So here we go, at the crossroads. This is our message today. Hopefully everybody has an outline. And so I want to read from Luke 19, 28 to 44. This is Palm Sunday, and I want to read about Palm Sunday, and I'll just start with verse 28. After Jesus had said this, he went up on ahead, going up to Jerusalem. As he approached Bethpage and Bethany at the hill called the Mount of Olives, he sent 2 of his disciples, saying to them, "Go to the village ahead of you, and as you enter it, you will find a colt tied there, which no one has ever ridden. Untie it and bring it here. If anyone asks you, 'Why do you untie it?' say, 'The Lord needs it.'" Those who were sent ahead went and found it just as he had told them. As they were untying the colt, its owners asked them, "Why are you untying the colt?" They replied, "The Lord needs it." They brought it to Jesus, threw their cloaks on the colt, and put Jesus on them. As he went along, people spread their cloaks on the road. When he came near the place where the road goes down the Mount of Olives, the whole crowd of disciples began joyfully to praise God in loud voices for all the miracles they had seen. I was hearing those voices today. Come to think of it, it was just voices in the room. It wasn't all accountable for all of us. I could hear the sound of joy, the sound of these voices that we see here, the loud voices. We've just seen a lot of miracles, a lot of great, wonderful things. I could just feel that praise. It's like, this is like Palm Sunday. The Lord is sort of causing Palm Sunday to happen right here. "Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord. Peace in heaven and glory in the highest." These are all the things they were shouting. Some of the disciples in the crowd said to Jesus, "Teacher, rebuke your disciples." "I tell you," he replied, "if they keep quiet, the stones will cry out." As he approached Jerusalem and saw the city, he wept over it and said, "If you, even you, had only known on this day what would bring you peace, but now it is hidden from your eyes. The days will come upon you when your enemies will build an embankment against you and encircle you and hem you in on every side." And of course, he's talking about AD 70, where Jerusalem was destroyed. And Israel was judged, really, in a very real way, and didn't really recover from that until recently, until 1948. "They will dash you to the ground, you and the children within your walls. They will not leave one stone on another, because you," is the key phrase, "did not recognize the time of God's coming to you." So when I say at the crossroads, I've noticed that in the Lord there are these crossroads. There are these times, these pivotal moments in our lives where actually God comes to bring change, even to answer our prayers in a way where it really turns the tide. And so the key thing is, when God does that, for us to be ready to cooperate. Because actually, if we look at Palm Sunday, it was one of those days. Daniel prophesied the time between the decree authorizing the rebuilding of Jerusalem, which was March 4th, 445 BC, and the appearing of the Messiah. He said it would be 483 years. Some say this puts the date on Palm Sunday of April 6th, AD 32, using the Jewish calendar of 360 days per year. Now, I've looked into this thing, and the remarkable thing about it is, I don't think anybody has it really dialed in completely precisely, but let me just say this. When you start counting and doing all this math, it comes out almost every time somewhere between 28 and 32 AD. It's really quite remarkable. Those 483 years and the whole thing. So however you count it and count for everything, it's really quite remarkable. So there's something about this, even that proclamation, that prophetic word, and Palm Sunday. And this is the appearing of the Messiah. Now the Messiah had already been in place, right? He was born probably in 4 BC, something like that, 3 or 4, somewhere in that neighborhood. You know, he had already been on the earth for a while. So he had actually technically appeared, and certainly had been teaching and ministering and to the people. He had been sowing into the Lord, and preparing them for what God wanted to do. But on this day, it was one of those crossroads. It was one of those times where now there's a visitation. Palm Sunday, I believe, was the day, literally, of visitation for the Jews to receive their long-awaited Messiah King. Now, why do I say that? Well, for one thing, Jesus on this day, he stops operating discreetly. You remember, as you see through the pages of the New Testament, he's always trying to hide tone it down, walk away, and everything, because actually there have been a couple of times in that whole history where they want to, especially after he multiplied the food, I guess that was sort of the kicker, you know? Hey, if he's the Messiah, he can multiply food. We don't need anybody. We got all the food we need, right? So it doesn't matter. We'll always have food, no matter what the Romans or anybody else. And if he can multiply food, what else can he multiply? And that really got them. They tried to make him king right then, right? But he always walked away. He always was discreet. He always sort of hidden. He always told people, don't tell anybody what happened, you know, because he didn't want them to try to forcibly take him and make him this Messiah at the wrong time, or cause the atmosphere to be kind of polluted in a way, because he knew what we were made of, and he could understand the spirit of that. It wasn't so much that they were receiving what he had to say, and that they would get caught up in the miracles and all the things that were happening. But anyway, he had to do those to show his credentials, and also he had great, great compassion. But that day that we are talking about here, April 6th, AD 32, if that was the day, whatever it was, on Palm Sunday, was prepared by, of course, all the ministries Jesus had already done, including one notable miracle that had already happened. It just happened just before this time, just a few weeks before. It was the resurrection of a man named Lazarus. So when that happened, all the priests were very aware of this, because some of them were actually there when he got raised. And it was very confusing to them, because there wasn't just one person that witnessed this, but a whole bunch of them witnessed this resurrection. Because they all went out with him where Lazarus was buried. Remember that? And he calls forth, I love that Jesus of Nazareth scene where he holds, isn't it cool? He holds his hand up. Anybody remember that? Lazarus, come forth, you know, like that, you know. And then this guy, that director is so great, and he comes out, and you know, the music's up, and he comes out, and he walks out, and everybody's horrified. You know, I love that picture anyway. Don't you? I mean, it's awesome. I could watch that a dozen times, you know, it's just, I never get tired of it. So, anyway, that's why a bunch of people out there, right? But Zechariah prophesied what this revelation of the Messiah would look like on that day at the Crossroads. And so, we see it described really, really well in Matthew 21, verses 4 and 5. So I want to just read those verses. And there's some wording in here that I want to pay particularly attention to as we move on through the rest of this message. This took place to fulfill what was spoken through the prophet. Say to daughter Zion, see, your king comes to you, gentle and riding on a donkey, and on a colt, the foal of a donkey. And so that passage is a quote actually of Zechariah 9:9. And I think the key word that I want to focus in on as we move along here is the word gentle. The word gentle. He comes in a gentle way. He didn't come as a conquering king with the whole thing in the army and the whole thing in the swords. He came as a king, but he came as a gentle, humble king. So in the crowd that day, as we look back to Luke chapter 19, there were all kinds of voices. There were voices of praise, dramatic voices of praise. Hosanna, Hosanna! They were singing and laying down their cloaks, and there was just great pandemonium in the air. It was just a great celebration, and we know that what they were celebrating was all the miracles. Matter of fact, that's what it says in verse 37. The whole crowd of disciples began joyfully to praise God in loud voices for all the miracles they had seen, the most recent of which, of course, was this resurrection of Lazarus. So there was those voices of praise, which were really amazing. But also, in the crowd that day, there were voices of anger and offense. Some of the Pharisees in the crowd said to Jesus, "Teacher, rebuke your disciples." I tell you, he replied, if they keep quiet, the stones are going to cry out. It was just a great day, an amazing day of celebration at the same time. So you have both these voices going on, but the thing is, the truth of the matter is that neither group recognized the gravity of the day. They did not recognize that the whole nation at that moment was at the crossroads. You know the reason why they didn't recognize it is they weren't connecting with his heart. The people were rejoicing for the miracles, and in the background of all this story is that now the king's going to come. Now the Romans going to get kicked out. Now we're going to move into our inheritance. And what we had lost is this people that have been besieged for centuries and haven't had our own. Now we're going to move into our glory and rule the world, and so on and so forth. That's sort of in the background of the whole thing. Now we're not going to have any more poverty. They're not going to be allowed to steal from us anymore. We're going to grow up in every way, economically and militarily and so on. And the other side of the equation, they're just mad and angry that he's getting so much attention, because their main thing is they already were in power and already were cheating and doing all kinds of horrible crimes toward the people, and actually doing quite well with the occupation, frankly. And they're mad at him getting this much attention and calling him all these religious names and so on and so forth. So you got both these things going on here, but the fact of the matter is that neither group were really connecting with God's heart. I want to focus on that. So really the true revelation of Palm Sunday was the gentle Father offering his love and his peace to his children. If you look back at Matthew chapter 21, again, gentle, right? And riding on a donkey. He didn't come in the way that maybe they expected, but they missed it altogether. And the thing that they missed most of all was the relational part of this whole thing. God was offering a change. It was like a father to his kids. Not as a mighty conqueror, certainly he was that, but he was offering love and peace to his kids. And they didn't get it. They weren't understanding it. Matter of fact, if you look at verse 41, it says, it's really important in the story to catch this part. As he approached Jerusalem and saw the city, he wept over it. We don't often talk about that part. He wept over it. He cried over it. And he said, oh, I just wish, amongst all this commotion, all the voices, just you would have known on this day, he says, interesting, on this day, what would bring you peace. But now it is hidden from your dead eyes. Now the importance of the day, obviously, was something in God that he was doing. Appointed, but they had actually forfeited all this days before. Just their whole lifestyle, the whole atmosphere of the nation. They weren't really ready to receive a father. They weren't really ready to receive a healing. They were angry, they were bitter. Some were militant. We have the zealots on the one side. There's these leaders that were taking advantage of the people and actually enjoying the chaos of the Romans in there. And then there was everything in between. Just lots of confusion, lots of pain, and maybe even hardness of heart, right? And here came Jesus with the softness of heart, and nobody recognized the compassion. Nobody saw what was going on. All they saw was power in the miracles, and they thought, well, maybe there's more coming, right? And the religious leaders, they saw a threat. So Jesus, we see in Matthew 23, verse 37, he said, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you kill the prophets and stone those sent to you. How often I have longed to gather your children together, as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and you are not willing. Again, another expression of the Father's heart for them. Jesus came to get back his kids. He was coming back like a dad. He was coming back to love them, take the hurt out of them. Look, your house has left you desolate, for I tell you, you will not see me again until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. And by the way, I believe that day is coming faster and faster.
Amen.
It's really amazing what's going on in even Israel right now. Unparalleled historically. I think I'm safe to say that, unparalleled historically. It's amazing. And what's happening to Jews around the world, and just a newfound love for Jesus, a new awakening really is happening right on our watch, right in this historical time, which is really crazy. I mean, if you start thinking about that, after a couple of thousand years, all of a sudden things are beginning to wake up and we get to be alive at that time. These very passages are coming alive, but I don't believe that the heart has changed. Lots of people get caught up in all the prophecy and the things, you know, and line up their charts and everything, but really we're going to miss that too if we don't understand God's compassionate, lovely heart. He's saying that to all of us. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, I want to gather you up. I want to love you, and then I want you to be lovers. That's my original thing, the original mandate. So it's very important that they at that time understood Jesus from the heart, but it's important for us to understand Jesus from the heart. Very interesting passage in Matthew chapter 13, and he's talking about hearing God's voice, right? And he's talking about why people respond to God and don't. And so it's the parable of the sower, you know, the seed that's sowed on various kinds of ground. But I just want to just read a part of that, because that's not really the key part of the gist of the sermon, other than this part. Verse 14, in them is fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah. Again, he's talking about these people. You'll be ever hearing but never understanding. You'll be ever seeing but never perceiving. They were seeing, but they weren't perceiving. They were rejoicing. They were actually doing what you would probably want to do on a day like that, right? But on the inside, they weren't getting it. They were just getting it on the outside. They were seeing, but they weren't perceiving. They were hearing, but they were not understanding. For this people's heart, next line, has become calloused. You know, it's amazing how easy it is to get calloused. One of the hardest things to deal with is when people get religiously calloused. They got so much scripture in them and so much this and that, and then they're just calloused. They become hardened. And they start saying weird things. Like, you know what, miracles aren't for today, they were only for a few centuries ago. And they start putting all kinds of boundaries in things and what's allowed and what's not allowed and what you can do in church, what you can. And just things, you know, that callous thing happening to people that are well-meaning sometimes, but that callous is a really big problem. And so, of course, even today, even if you go to Israel today, there's no more religious people on the planet than whatever's going on in Israel right now, whether it's Muslim or whether it's Christian or whether it's Jewish, right? It's always been like that. There's no more religious city in all the world than Jerusalem, right?
That's true.
But there's this one little problem called calluses. They hardly hear with their ears, and they've closed their eyes. Otherwise, they might see with their eyes, hear with their ears, understand, here's the key, with their hearts, and turn, I would heal them. They couldn't understand with their heart. They loved to talk about endless religious things, but they were missing the Father who had come to heal them and help them. And he came lowly, he came gentle, and they didn't see it. They couldn't see it. And so this is really critical. I love this passage. It's just a couple of verses over Matthew chapter 11. I preached on this just recently. And here's another way to explain it. Verse 28, come to me all who are weary and burdened. Remember I talked about that? And I will give you what? Rest. They weren't ready for rest. They were ready for war. They were ready for something for me. They weren't ready for, I love you, Jesus. There's something else in the mix. So Jesus says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart. There it is again. And you'll find rest for your souls, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. And they didn't want anything to do with that easy yoke and that easy burden. There was a disconnect there. And interestingly enough, I was looking at this, Janice and I were looking at these scriptures and thinking about Mary and, you know, the one that was Mary and Martha we always talk about as the one being busy and Mary sitting at his feet. And we see the story, and the interesting thing about this story is that I believe Mary understood from the heart. She understood what was about to happen. She understood who Jesus was and what he was about. And so the very night before this all happens, this Palm Sunday, this is when she anoints him with this beautiful oil. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany where Lazarus lived, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. Here a dinner was given in Jesus' honor. Martha served while Lazarus was among those reclining at the table with him. Then Mary took about a pint of pure nard, an expensive perfume. She poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But one of the disciples, Judas Iscariot, who was later to betray him, objected. Why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor was worth a year's wages? He did not say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. He was religious. And a religious spirit always is the opposite of what you expect. It takes, it doesn't give, it steals. See, there it is again. As keeper of the money bag, he actually used to help himself to what was put into it, which I just can't imagine Jesus appointing him to that position. I have to meditate on that someday. It blows my mind that Jesus would purposely put that guy in charge, knowing all along, right? But look what Jesus says. Leave her alone, Jesus replied. It was intended that she should save this perfume for the day of my burial. You'll always have the poor among you, but you will not always have me. He knew. And I think she knew. The point is, she recognized him. She recognized him who he was, that he was worth this love, this extravagant love. Forget all the expressions and the outward things or whatever. this person was to be loved. And isn't it amazing? It says in the Bible, another place, wherever this gospel is preached, this message of what she did will be proclaimed too. So here we are in the 21st century, and we're declaring what she did again. 20 centuries later, this is how the Spirit has allowed this to stay alive in the mind of the church. Why? Because God's underlining something. He wants relationship with us. He wants love and understanding. He wants this fatherly place with us. He wants love. Really. How painful it must have been for Jesus to know that a few days later everyone was going to turn on him. He was there in the midst of all this celebration, and he realized the excitement, but he also knew that just a few days later they were going to turn on him, and a bunch of them would be saying crucify him, and the others wouldn't be saying anything, and they let the whole thing happen. And the leaders are there cheering the whole thing on. Thing is, it's hard to tell, I think, whether Jesus died of his wounds or a broken heart, or both, because of what happened in the horrible, searing rejection. He came to offer peace and grace and love and to love his kids, and they rejected and did just exactly the opposite, and masqueraded religiously even, but there was no heart. And so they didn't understand. Their heart had calluses. So we don't want to have those calluses on our heart, right? Because the application of this to our life is when God wants to change a season in your life, faith is going to be required, revelation is going to be required, but especially, and this is one I haven't noticed as much as I did during this sermon, especially love are required on our part. Love's required in our heart. See, if you think about these various transitions that come, even in a short amount of time, to bring us into a new space. Actually, there's a lot of preparatory work that goes on behind, as we mentioned before. And so, for example, transitions into miracles. So there's people in this room that need a miracle. You need an intervention from the Lord. You need him to come, right? The thing is, I found out something about this. I'm always looking for a miracle. I'm always looking for breakthrough, whether it's in business or in our bodies, physically, or some sort of breakthrough with regard to relationships. I'm always looking for these, and it's just so amazing when it happens. It's just such a glorious thing. But one thing I've sort of developed over time as I've, in understanding and walking with the Lord, is that I cannot afford in my walk with the Lord to get bitter or judgmental in any way, either toward the Lord or anybody else, especially when I'm in trouble. I need a miracle, which is one of our greatest temptations. God, you could have this. God, you should have done that. Or God, why aren't you doing this? And it's really, really hard sometimes. And sometimes over time you get bitter, especially if you had to wait a long time for a miracle. I have a couple of those in my life. And I've found that actually my greatest hindrance toward a miracle is actually compassion. I have to stay in this place with Jesus so I'll recognize the miracle when it comes. Right? Otherwise, I won't even see it. And you can become so religious even and not see it. You can just do all the right things and say the right things and shout the whole thing and every that, but in your heart could be daggers on the inside of you. Because you're making the great show on the outside in front of everybody doing what you're supposed to do, but on the inside you're just really bitter and you're mad. And I have just to watch that madness on the inside of me, that bitterness. Because if it comes and I let it get any hold of my heart, I stop hearing, my ears get plugged up, I stop seeing. My heart gets callous. And I can't be alive and respond the way I need to at the moment when God changes the season. I'm not there. There's no faith in me. There's no love in me. There's no revelation in me. I'm getting it wrong. I'm not even seeing when he comes. And I'll tell you one thing. I can't afford bitterness or that sort of thing in my life because I've got to be alive. I've got to be awakened when the season comes. I want to be in there doing exactly in the right heart, receiving Jesus with the right understanding, and then letting him do his miracle. And that includes faith and revelation and real faith and real revelation, what God's doing in a moment, right? And so this transition, we see this in the various stories in the Bible. It's really remarkable. Like one of my favorite things to study and think about is the Promised Land. It's in the Old Testament, but then moving into the New Testament. It's just moving into the Promised Land. It's mind-boggling to me. It just boggles my mind. After 40 years of wandering in the desert, and you finally, you see all this stuff happen, and the manna, and the cloud, and the whole thing, pillar of fire, and the sea parts, and everything, and now you can't go in the Promised Land because you're afraid of the enemy? What is it? Oh, man, this thing's really dangerous. this bitterness of heart, this hardness. They couldn't believe for the promised land. Here the blessing is. And what was at the root of it wasn't faith. What was at the root of it was they had lost their heart for God himself. Their actually attitude toward God is they just believed that he really wasn't on their side. That actually he was someone else. And so they didn't have any faith in the tank to go attack these enemies. Because deep down the inside, all their faith was being drained. It's like someone pulled the plug out by their bitterness. See what I'm saying? It was actually a lack of love for God that actually caused them not to be able to go into the promised land. They really didn't trust him anymore and had very little affection. I love this story of blind Bartimaeus. One of my favorite stories in the whole Bible. It's so great. So Jesus is going through Jericho, and he's going through Jericho. This guy starts screaming out. He's a blind guy, and he's sitting on the side of the road. We have a hard time imagining such things. But in these cultures of the world, you know, the blind, the broken, they were out on the streets, you know. They were, you know, begging usually somewhere in a temple or somewhere where people were going through. And he heard that Jesus was coming through. And he started shouting and asking for healing and asking for God to help him. And they were all telling him to shut up. Shut up, you know. Because in that day, if you had that kind of problem, they believed you were that way because you earned it. Because you had done some sinful, horrible thing. And so if you had any kind of physical condition or anything, it was doubly bad for you. Because they believed not only were you sick, but you deserved to be that way because you committed some sort of sin, or maybe one of your forefathers did it, right? So you deserve to be that way. And by the way, this is a special guy here. Jesus, he's the man. He's the talk of the town. He's the main guy now. And he's not going to stop for you, you sinner. Which is fascinating to me as he's walking by. Jesus kept on walking. But when he started crying out, Son of David, have mercy. Isn't it interesting? He kept screaming. And actually the word there, the calling out, is actually a word for animal cry. It's a loud shriek. I mean, this guy's shrieking. The word cry in the Greek. It's that same word, by the way, we talk about from Romans 8 all the time, about the adoption. We cry out, Abba, Father. That word cry out is also a shriek, right? Interesting. So he's crying out, Abba. He's actually saying, have mercy on me. And when he says it, Jesus stops. Boom. I just think that that's where all these seasons come from. When we get in touch with the mercy, the love of God, that we're clearing the channel. We're understanding who God really is. He's not only a miracle worker, but he's a lover. He cares about me. There's a connection he wants to make with me, right? He cares about my body, my mind, my soul. He cares about my family. He cares about everything. I'm not just sort of spitting in the wind, hoping it hits something, right? I'm crying out for mercy, and I've got a laser beam on the mercy of God. And as he called out, Jesus stops and turns, and he heals him. I just think that's amazing. I can just see that picture in my mind. He's walking, and he hears that mercy, and just stops, right? He's a busy guy. He's important. Everybody's pressing on him, and he goes back for this blind guy. That picture says it all. His season was then, but occasioned by Lord have mercy. And there's other seasons like this, and you read through the New Testament, you'll begin to see it all over the place. There's a Syrophoenician woman, which is one of the most dramatic stories in the whole Bible. And she's a Gentile, and she's approaching this great teacher, and he's, of course, a Jew, and there's this rift between the two, you know, hatred between the Jews and the Gentiles, and, of course, the Jews' mindset toward them and the Gentiles' mindset toward the Jews, and all of this and everything. And Jesus says something like, you know, I can't give the children's food, the Jewish food. I've been sent to Israel first. It's not time for me to feed you guys, right? He knew it was coming soon. And he even used the word like it's not good to give the children's food to the dogs, which is a common name for Gentiles. I don't think it has the sort of same import as it does today, or maybe it does, but they were all aware of what everybody thought, right? So instead of getting all offended, she says, you know what? But even the dogs get the crumbs from the children's table. Whoa. What an answer. You know what Jesus said? For this reply, go see your child up there. Your child's healed. Wonder if they didn't make that reply. It was the season. It was a time of change. and she almost missed it. But she somehow persisted in that moment. She didn't miss her window. That's what I'm saying. How many windows are missed? Because the time comes. Even Jesus said, however, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on the earth? And could I just say, along with what we've been saying here, however, when the Son of Man comes, will he find a faith that comes from compassion? Matter of fact, I believe it's Galatians said the only thing that counts is faith operating through love, right? It's the only thing that counts. Faith operating through love. So these go together. There's also in our life transitions that we make, season changes from great peril. The disciples in Gethsemane were in a lot of trouble. Jesus, of course, was in a lot of trouble in Gethsemane, but that dynamic that happened in Gethsemane is actually fascinating to me because, again, funny thing is, Jesus is looking for love himself, even in this case. Jesus went with his disciples to Gethsemane. He says, sit while I go over there and pray. Sit here while I go over there and pray. He took Peter and 2 sons of Zebedee along with him, and he began to be sorrowful and troubled. Then he said to them, my soul's overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me. He's asking them, not a religious thing, not even a prayerful thing. Really behind all this is he's asking for friends. He's asking, please, could you just stay close? I feel weak. I feel overwhelmed. Would you just come and spend some time with me, praying with me, helping me? Going a little further, you see the compassion here? It's actually in reverse here in this story. But it actually works both ways. It's this love relationship God's after, right? And it prepares the way for great transitions and great times. It's just really important that we always don't lose this, right? And actually, in this space was so important because if they would have done what he says to do next, they probably wouldn't have fared as bad, including Peter, who denies the Lord twice. Going a little farther, he fell down with his face to the ground and prayed, my Father, if it's possible, may this cup be taken from me, yet not as I will, but as you will. Then he returned to his disciples and found them sleeping. Couldn't you men keep watch with me for 1 hour, he asked. And by the way, in this love and partnership that we have, if you'll do that, there's something else you need. Watch and pray, so that you'll not fall into temptation. The spirit's willing, but the flesh is weak. It could be translated trial, fall, but the issue was he knew there was great danger. Sometimes we get in great danger. We get a disease in our body, our family's getting attacked in a serious way. And the thing is, one of the things I've found that's so ironic is actually the thing is so shocking and in dangerous situations that actually what happens is one of the first things that gets drained, if you haven't been walking this way with the Lord, is love. It's like, God, what in the world did you do to me? Why am I in this place? It's not even fair. It's not right. And if you let that love get drained, then you try to fight in faith, but in the background, you're angry, you're bitter, right? And it's not easy not to be, especially when you get blindsided, right? I know. I'm not saying this is easy, but when he says here, watch and pray so you'll not fall into temptation, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. He's telling them this is going to be your protection. You need to draw close to God right now. You need to draw close. You need to get close. You need to pray. This is your time to cry out to God. This is your Abba Father moment. You're in the middle of a great trial. And I've watched also what something ironic is that people that aren't used to praying, that they don't have any resource. I found that actually if before the event happens, before there's a problem, they're not praying, haven't got that revelation in their life or their everyday life. When trouble comes, they're so ill-equipped. They don't just keep on, but people that have been praying, people that have that habit in their life, it's so amazing. When you get in trouble, you just keep on going. You know, you just do what you've always done. And you just are very at home. It's a whole foreign situation, but you've got your access with God. Not only just to hope for a miracle, but prayer is more than just getting my list down. Prayer is this wonderful intimacy between the Father and you. Jesus prayed because he liked to pray. He didn't pray because it was a discipline. I've been trying to build this into our business people so much. It's so helpful. Because sometimes business is one of these crossroads because we spend so much time doing it, you know, trying to make a living. And yet we pull Jesus out of the whole thing, right? Yet we're devoting all these hours, and we become prayerless in the middle of our companies, in the middle of our jobs and everything. We don't carry that same spirit, and then we just relegate it to some little time at noon or sometime in the morning. We don't carry God with us into the whole thing, right? And experience the compassion of the Lord in the whole thing, and feel God's touch and feel God's pleasure on me, and that I'm not working alone, that God's working with, God's helping me in this. We're doing this together. The Father and I are doing this together, that sort of sense. And what that does, it activates prayer in another way. That's why sometimes religious intercessory prayer is really dangerous. Because people get all caught up in this religious thing and everything, but just like those people on that day, they're all jumping around and everything, but on the inside, they're not doing so great with God. Truth be known, if we pull back the inside and look on the inside, they're just really pretty angry. A lot of that energy they're doing praying-wise is just frustration over the whole thing. Or even like engagement and noticing miracles and things that are happening, just, rejoice, but they don't really know on the inside. They're not thinking that God really loves them and cares enough to touch them, right? And so they're stuck. So in this place, it's so important that as we're transitioning from peril, that we find love. But you find love a long time ago, before the peril. Find him now. Enjoy him now. Let him give you rest now. Hear his voice now. Hear his compassion now. Because in the trenches, it's hard to hear the love of God if you're not kind of warmed up to that, right? In the trenches, it's just one big black hole. There's no one there, right? And then you pray, but you just feel so weak. And one of the first things to go out the door in a time of peril sometimes is just effective, not just prayer, but let me just say trusting prayer, peaceful prayer. And I would say this, hearing prayer. Do this, do that. Because when you get sick, for example, or under a major trial, one of the biggest things you need is wisdom. You need to hear a clear voice behind you saying, this is the way, walk in it. This is the way, walk in it. That verse, by the way, is found in Isaiah, I believe, 30, where they're freaking out about the condition there, and they're trying to figure out whether I run or I don't. Do I leave or do I stay, right? In times of oppression, it's so important to hear the loving voice of your Father tell you what to do. So even when you're sick, say with cancer or whatever, you can go get medical care or not. You can, either way, God will help you. He'll show you the wisdom that you need for that moment, right? There's no edges here. And just because you went and got medical care, just because you went to that person or tried that, that doesn't necessarily, that doesn't disqualify you from faith, because love is deeper, compassion is deeper than faith. It directs your faith, right? It helps you find the right answer. And sometimes those answers go through some very bizarre twists and turns, and at the end of the day, when you go through one of these difficult transitions, you find out that not only was God taking care of your problem, he was healing like 5 other things in your life along the way. Getting all the priorities lined up. He's so sneaky that way, you thought one thing was wrong, but there was like 5 things wrong, and he fixed every one of them. He might fix your marriage, he might fix this and that, your attitude about things, It's like a chiropractic adjustment. Boom, boom, And it takes a while. He says, watch and pray so you will not fall in the temptation. And so you won't mess up, They weren't ready, And they weren't ready for trouble. And they were asleep. And when it came, their first reactions weren't very good. And Peter denied the Lord twice. But she carried with the rest of his life, right? Jesus told him, right? So there's also this part. It transitions into ministry calling. And so we're talking about Peter. Very interesting. So Jesus appears to the disciples for a number of days. But then there's this appointment by the lake he has with the disciples. So they haven't caught any fish. And so he says, throw your net on the other side of the boat and they catch all this fish. Remember that? So Peter, he throws himself into the water. He knows it's the Lord staying on the shore. And then Peter and Jesus have this conversation. Interesting. When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord. He said, you know that I love you. Jesus said, feed my lambs. Again, Jesus said, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He answered, yes, Lord. You know that I love you. Jesus said, take care of my sheep. The third time he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And Peter's hurt now because Jesus asked him the third time, do you love me? He said, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. Feed my sheep, right? Very truly, I tell you, that he tells him what his future is going to be. But with those 3 I love yous, he restored him back to fellowship because because he had denied him 3 times. He allowed him to say it. And it was Jesus' way of saying, okay, we're back on even footing. But by the way, you're not only going to follow me, but you're going to die like I died. And he makes this prophecy, right? So this is a very dramatic moment. But when I think about my ministry and the calling that I have on my head and the transitions, it's amazing because these transitions, some of them have been, almost all of them have been very dramatic from the time I left med school to various changes. Some of you were with me in some of those changes and very intimately with me in some of those changes. One of the biggest change that happened was on the same day that I have this incident in John Wimber's office where I received this Fathers Love You impartation that's absolutely ruined me for a few months. It took me apart molecule by molecule in a way I never had before. It wasn't power, it wasn't revelation, it was just pure raw love poured into me. We call this around here the Father's love, this deep compassion that first was for me. But on that same day that I went, I had a phone call from Cambodia about us going into this dangerous situation in Cambodia and starting all over. Cambodia was just beginning to come back out of this horrible stuff that had happened with regard to the genocide and everything. And the Vietnamese now were leaving and they were just beginning to transition. And some of the leaders were calling people home, but a lot of people have been tortured and it was horrible. So this leader calls me and says, I had a dream about you and you and I went to Cambodia. You know, I'm thinking, Cambodia? Wow, I'm not sure I'm ready for that right now, you know? And this is just before I have my, like, being taken apart by the molecules experience there with John and that whole experience that happened to me. And so, but the thing is, it was funny because when that happened and love came in a way that I hadn't experienced in a long, long time and probably never really experienced that dimension. I've experienced a lot of power and a lot of revelation in my life. I'd been that time ministering and all over the place in deserts and jungles and everything, but never had really had that sort of impartation of love to me. And it was funny because after that happened, it's so funny because at the same time the Lord got me on the inside, he started taking me out. And so as I'm trying to make heads or tails of this compassion thing I'm feeling, at the same time, God's asking me to make a decision for another people group, right? And my tendency at first was to stay home, but then I just got this compassion in me because we love why? Because he first loved us. And I started feeling compassion for these Cambodians, and I'm thinking, we got to go do this. We got to go love those people. We're called to go do this. We got to go do that. And that's what transitions in the ministry do. True transitions, what happens is you just get compassion on the inside of you. And I don't pay as much attention anymore to my leading of revelation. I pay attention to my compassion on the inside. When we started the warehouse over there, it was like this big, mighty, empty space, you know. And I'm thinking, we're going to start a food thing? And I thought, you know, but Jesus likes this kind of stuff. And if he likes it, and I know he loves that kind of thing, then maybe I should love it too. So I know I probably can't go too wrong by trying, so I'll just try a little bit, and if it doesn't work, okay, so we began. So here we are, like in 25,000 square feet, and we're like taking up 10 feet of it, you know. And the thing began to grow and grow, and I knew I was in this place of, wow, I don't want to have a church, and there's no compassion. I want to have demonstrable compassion every day. That was my thought, you know, when I did. I thought, I want to be like a real Jesus person. I want to really like make a difference. And I'm thinking, I told Mother Teresa that day, you know, what I said, when I met her, I said, you don't know Orange County. She said, doesn't matter. Look, see, and do something about that. I got that route around in my brain, you know. She says, you'll find them. Just go find them in Orange County. I said, you don't understand. I mean, I'm looking at you, and this looks like the Bible, you know. It looks like the poor and the dead are laying everywhere. And I'm in Orange County. How in the world could we? Oh, she says, you are so wrong. She kept wagging her finger at me. You're wrong. I'm having an argument with Mother Teresa. It's really embarrassing. Actually, I'm thinking, what am I doing arguing with Mother Teresa, you know? Because I'm thinking my compassion should be going out like, you know, out there, you know, to India. I feel guilty even. I should be out here with you, you know. But she was directing me back. And I began to get a hold of that, and something just started growing on me. Just kept growing. See, transitions, even when we transition into seasons, where God wants to use us, boy, don't underestimate the power of the compassion going through you. When you have that, or you can feel God's compassion for whoever you're going to work, even though you might not feel a lot directly, you can't go on. You can't miss. I've been feeling compassion for this little, where are you guys? Jamaica. I had a divine appointment on my trip about Jamaica. Of all the places, I went to India to find out about Jamaica, but I found out something about it, and I thought, because what you told me about that other side of the island, the way that it works, I've been thinking about it. I think about stuff like that. I think about peoples like that. I think about the peoples in Tibet that don't know their right hand from their left, and nobody can seemingly reach them, but we're poised now to step into that place. I'm thinking about what Jesus must think about them. It's not another ministry notch. It's these people don't know their right hand from their left, and they haven't for years and centuries. Somebody needs to go in there and help. In other parts of the world, you know? So these transitions, these are examples from my life, and God wants to change the season of your life. And sometimes, man, I'm telling you, if you get a hold of this and you get into one of these things, you'll move so fast. Man, the warehouse began to move at a speed I never imagined. The things in Cambodia we've done, other things we've done around here are moving so fast I can't even. It'll take you on a ride, man. I mean, I got on the ride, man. Hold on, you know. You want some ministry in Cambodia? Here. You know, before I know, I got a 40,000 square foot building I'm supposed to pay for, you know, and all this stuff's going on, you know, and wow. So it's not like a faithless ride. It takes a tremendous amount of faith, but I tell you what I found. If it's undergirded with compassion, it has a different thing in it. There's a crossroads there. And actually there's like firm ground. I mean, like, how can God hate us feeding people? It's got to end in a good way. I had a dream last night about it. I dreamed that the entire warehouse was beyond anything I'd ever seen before. I couldn't believe it. It was like a gigantic department store, and every place was in order, and there was the automotive section, and there was this section and that section, except it wasn't like it is now. It covered the entire warehouse, like 50,000 square feet of this massive thing that was going on. Everybody's working and everything. I couldn't believe it. I was just shocked. I think, wow, who did this? How did this happen? I'm walking around. I don't know. Who knows what God has for us in the dimensions God wants to go. But compassion is our sheer way to know that if we're going to have a season like that, it's the transition point, right? And the power and the revelation come, and then you got yourself a battle, right? But I tell you what, you can endure any battle that a ministry would take as long as the compassion stays in place. You can stand through anything. You know you're on the right side of God, in other words. That's a good word. Getting on the right side of God. The compassionate side of God is the right side. If you got that going with whatever you're doing, you're going to find your way through all of the nooks and crannies and all the detail of it. Bob, I just really appreciate you and Tasua. Janice and I went to get prayer for her on Wednesday, and there you were faithfully, and you've been doing this for I don't know how many years, both of you. What is it, a decade now? And there you are, over a decade, praying for the sick. And it was so compassionate, and the music was on, there were people waiting out there, and you're spending time with us, like an hour, just praying over us and blessing us. You don't get anything out of it except love and just compassion you're showing us. I could feel the compassion. Thank you so much. That's genuine ministry. When I grow up, I want to be like you. Always stand. So I'm going to say, I've got wonderful news here. Here's the wonderful news. This word I'm given doesn't have to be a theory. It doesn't have to wait till I hold my mouth right and I just get all this compassion all of a sudden. It doesn't come from being repentant of religious works. I don't even know if you can do that. Something's got to happen on the inside. So we have this thing. We call it the Father's love, yes, but no, it's based on this one premise. We love because he first loved us. So we got this paradigm built deep in our church, which I tried it out last night, and it was very lovely because it's already built here. That actually God can love you right where you are from your heart, and you can have an experience with his love right now. Just by saying, I need love. Father, would you love me? Would you bring your love into my heart? Wow, aren't you glad it's not too hard? It's not hard, but it's sort of profound, isn't it? Because we always want to do something or be somewhere, but just standing there and receiving, being a good receiver is really, I think, a critical part of this whole thing. And it takes faith there. Jesus moved in miracles. He said the Father loves the Son and shows him all he's doing. And that word love is the word phileo, where it's like a divine hug. The Father gives the Son a divine hug and then shows him what he's doing. I think there's lots of divine hugs the Lord wants to give out today, this morning, if you care to accept it. Watch out for divine hugs, because sometimes on the other side of them are mighty miracles. Some of them are ministries. Some are transitions out of trouble. And you can reach out and touch the love of God right now. And while you're there receiving the love, you can also say, God, please heal my body, or God, please take care of my marriage, or God, please give me wisdom for this situation. But I found out when we did this last night that the Lord coated the whole place with love. It was like, we always know it because there's like a cloud that comes. A cloud of love. I believe there's love here. Today the Lord wants to offer it. If you would just like a touch of compassion and love from the Lord today, why don't you just come to the front? There may or may not be people who come along to pray for you. I don't know if I'm going to pray for a few of you if I get around people, but that's really not as important as you just saying, Lord, I just need love today. You might be in a difficult circumstance, or you might not be in no circumstance. You might just be feeling a little dry, or you may be in a desperate place. You may be contemplating ministry, stepping out into a new way. Maybe that's what you're in. Maybe you don't know what to do about your finances, and you just need God to calm you down long enough to hear his voice. Matter of fact, I think that's what this is today. It's a calm you down time enough to hear God's voice. So actually, you can actually hear his voice talk about your situation. We love because he first loved us. So I release the Father's love over this room. You can do that from your seat. You can do it in the front. I highly recommend you take a moment, let God love you, just give you a divine hug. And you know what? It sounds so supernatural, spiritual, but it's really simple. It's not beyond you. You don't have to go to the moon to get it. It's right here in your face. The Father's near you. He never leaves you. Just a question of whether you want to let him minister to you or not. Lord, would you minister to us, whether we're in our seat or up front? Would you just give us a dose of comfort and love? Would you just tell us you're here? Would you just come? I might come along and pray. Maybe some of us come along and pray. And if you pray for someone, just say, receive the Father's love. Don't get too much more fancy than that, okay? Because there's a real impartation going on here. I can feel it in the room already. Thank you, Lord, for your cloud. Thank you for your presence.
Seeing you move